Hey there everybody, welcome back to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. Today is the final part in our Strixhaven Commander videos. Everybody's taking their Precon and adding an extra $50 to it. Everybody was encouraged to keep their Commander or use the alternative one, but as you can see, somebody decided he didn't want to. But I am a fan of all the new Elder Dragons, so I'm glad one of them's getting in the spotlight. Well, anyways, let's jump straight into it and see who's playing what and their hands. Up first is Justin playing Gyome. He changed this deck up quite a bit. Instead of it being a life gain and loss deck, it seems to be much more of just life gain. It's also got a pretty good combo in it. All you need is Kodama, Golgari Rot Farm, and Scoot Swarm to get infinite 1/1 insects. Onto his hand, he keeps Swamp, Command Tower, Rogue's Passage, Soul Ring, Leyline Prowler, Fangren Marauder, and Murder. Up next is Ethan playing Veyran. He built this deck to be extremely similar to the Precon. It's an Izzet Spellslinger tank that aims to make a bunch of copies of Molten Psyche and deal everybody a bunch of damage. He keeps a hand of Mountain, Island, Fire Mind Vessel, Impulse, Molten Psyche, Mystic Retrieval, and Double Vision. Up next is Cody playing Adrix and Nev. He decided to keep his original commanders, and I can't blame him for that. He decided to add stuff that went along with the token strategy, like his favorite card, Coma. He kept a hand of Quandrix Campus, Forest, Geometric Nexus, Idol of Oblivion, Cultivate, Zimone, and Plaxcaster Frogling. And finally, we have Chandler, who's playing Shadrix Silverquill. And while this card wasn't in the original Precon list, everyone was okay with him playing it because we wanted at least one of the Elder Dragons to be represented. And so he kept a hand of Swamp, Plains, Secluded Steppe, Felwar Stone, Windborn Muse, Court of Grace, and Tragic Arrogance. Well, we've seen what everyone is playing, and their hands. Let's jump straight into the game. Justin wins the die roll and starts his turn off with a Rogue's Passage into his Soul Ring before passing. Ethan plays an Island and passes. Chandler plays a tapped Secluded Steppe and passes. Cody plays a tapped Quandrix Campus and passes. Everybody is now glaring at Justin. Justin just plays a Swamp and passes. Ethan plays a Mountain and passes. Wow. Chandler plays a Swamp, then taps R2 and casts his Felwar Stone before passing to Cody. Cody plays a Forest and then casts Coiling Oracle, who reveals a Coma off the top and puts it to his hand. Cody passes and Justin plays an Exotic Orchard, taps for 4, and casts his Commander before passing. On his end step, he gets a food token and Ethan casts Impulse. On his turn, Ethan cycles Forgotten Cave to draw a card, and then plays an Island before passing. Chandler plays a Plains, then taps for 4 to cast Windborn Muse before passing. Unfortunately, Cody misses a land drop, but he casts his Geometric Nexus and passes. Justin plays his Command Tower, then casts Leyline Prowler. After this, he moves to combat and swings at Ethan for 5 Commander. He then passes, gets another food token, Ethan plays an Island, and casts Fire Mind Vessel. He passes after that. On his turn, Chandler plays a Plains and then casts Shadrix Silverquill. He then moves to combat and makes a 2/1 Inkling and puts a 1/1 counter on each creature Ethan controls. And then passes. Cody makes his land drop, but unfortunately it's a Lumbering Falls. He then casts Zimone and passes to Justin. Justin plays a Forest. He then casts Wicked Wolf, having it fight Chandler's Windborn Muse. He decides to be benevolent and not bash Ethan's face in again, so he just passes and makes a food token. And on his turn, Ethan starts it off with Commander Sphere. He then casts Krark and passes to Chandler. Chandler plays a Swamp, and then drops Eldest Reborn. Its first phase means everybody has to sacrifice a creature. Chandler then moves to combat and gives Ethan a 1/1 counter on each creature he controls, and then Chandler will draw a card and lose a life. He then passes to Cody. Cody casts Cultivate, finding 2 basics, 1 to his hand and 1 to the battlefield tapped. Cody then plays the Island that he searched for and passes. Unfortunately, a Geometric Nexus trigger is missed. Justin plays a Swamp, then casts his Fangren Marauder. He explains to the table what it does, and then passes to Ethan. Ethan decides it's time to cast his Double Vision, and then just passes to Chandler. Eldest Reborn goes up another phase, and each opponent discards a card. Chandler then moves to combat, making another 2/1 Inkling, and then giving Ethan more 1/1 counters. Whoa! Chandler then casts Infernal Offering, making him and Cody each sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards, then having Justin and him return a creature card from their graveyard to the battlefield. Unfortunately for Justin, he has no creatures in his graveyard. Chandler returns his Windborn Muse, and then plays Orzhov Basilica, bouncing a land. He passes to Cody after that. Cody plays an Opal Palace, and then casts Forgotten Ancient. He passes to Justin after that, and Justin decides to just pass to Ethan. Ethan starts his turn off with a Mind Stone, then casts Blasphemous Act. Justin decides to respond by sacrificing 3 food tokens, giving Wicked Wolf indestructible, and gaining 15 life. After this, Ethan casts his commander and passes to Chandler. Eldest Reborn reaches its final form. Chandler sacrifices it and gets back Windborn Muse. Chandler then casts Court of Grace, becoming the Monarch. He moves to his end step, drawing a card, and passing to Cody. Cody plays a Forest, taps for 7, and casts Coma. He passes to Justin after that. Justin decides to move to combat, giving his Wicked Wolf unblockable from Rogue's Passage, and then swings at Chandler, gaining the Monarch. Justin then moves to his end step, drawing a card. Ethan plays a Study Hall as his land for turn. He then casts Molten Psyche. It gets copied twice thanks to Double Visions and his commander. Chandler realizes that with 6 cards in his hand, he will die to this, so he casts Sajiri Shelter, targeting his Windborn Muse, naming red. For those of you who don't know, Molten Psyche only cares about how many cards you've drawn that turn, not how many cards you drew with the copy of the spell. And so, with 3 copies of the spell on the stack, and everyone actually having 5 cards in hand, everybody but Ethan is about to take 30 damage. And after Ethan tore everyone a new one, he decides to cast Expressive Iteration. He exiles Hedron Archive, puts a card to his hand, and 1 to the bottom of his library. He then casts Hedron Archive, and then uses its mana to cast Izzet Signet. He passes to Chandler, and Chandler plays a Castle Ardenville. He then moves to combat and swings Windborn Muse at Justin. Now I know he taps the Spirit, but that was just a mistake. He even says swing for 2. And so Chandler gets the Monarch back, and then casts Deathbringer Regent, wiping the board. Cody responds by sacrificing a coil to make Coma indestructible. He then casts Liliana's Triumph because he does not want Coma around for the long haul. Chandler then passes to Cody, and Cody remembers to put 2 more counters on his Nexus. Cody plays Novagen Heart of Progress, then casts Eureka Moment, drawing 2 and putting a land from his hand to the battlefield, and unfortunately missing a Nexus trigger. Cody then passes to Justin, and Justin casts Druidic Satchel. After this, he casts Marshland Bloodcaster, and then after that, he passes to Ethan. Ethan starts his turn off by floating a red with his Commander Sphere, and then drawing a card off of it. He then plays a Mountain, and casts Izzet Locket. He passes to Chandler after that, who gets a 4/4 Angel on his upkeep. He plays a Swamp, and then recasts Shadrix, immediately moving to combat, making a 2/1 Inkling, and giving Ethan +1/+1 counters. Again. Chandler then passes, and Cody cycles a Lonely Sandbar on his end step. He then casts a Kazandu Tuskcaller on his turn. Cody then passes to Justin, and Chandler's Spider Sense suddenly starts tingling, because Justin immediately swings his Bloodcaster at him and gives it unblockable with his Rogue's Passage. Chandler pleads for Justin to reconsider because he can help take down Ethan, but Justin is sure he wants to do this, so Chandler is dead. And since Justin is the active player, he gets the Monarch. Justin then passes to Ethan, and on his end step, Ethan sacrifices Izzet Locket to draw 2 cards. Ethan then casts Mana Geyser, doubling it thanks to Double Visions. Justin and Cody each have 3 tapped lands, so Ethan makes 6 mana. Twice. He then casts an Opt, scrying 1 and drawing a card. He then casts Preordain, scrying 2 and drawing a card. He then casts Frantic Search, drawing 2, discarding 2, and untapping some lands. He then floats mana with his Mana Rocks, and then casts Dramatic Reversal, untapping them. Cody then finally remembers to put counters on his Geometric Nexus. Ethan decides it's time to use all of his floating mana, plus a blue, to cast Muse Vortex, X is equal to 10. And so he reveals the top 10 cards of his library, chooses an instant or sorcery, CMC 10 or less, casts it for free, and then puts all the other instants or sorceries into his hand. And so he decides to cast Solve the Equation to go find Mind's Desire. And so Ethan casts Seething Song, he gets 5 red mana and uses some of it to cast Mind's Desire. Storm count is 10. And instead of shuffling for every single one, we just let him get a good shuffle in and then reveal the top 10. And the poor guy reveals 8 lands, Rousing Refrain, and Windfall. He plays Command Tower from among them, then casts Rousing Refrain, getting 5 mana, and then casts Windfall. Everybody drops their hand and draws 5 cards. He then casts Melik. Melik reveals a Brainstorm off the top, and Ethan casts it. Melik creates a copy, so he draws 3, puts back 2, and then draws 3 again, and puts 2 more back. He then passes to Cody, who makes a 69/69. And then on his turn, he casts Shamanic Revelation to draw 2 cards and gain 4 life. He then casts Primal Command to search his library for a creature card and gain 7 life. He finds a Reform to his hand and then moves to combat, swinging 69 at Ethan, who obviously blocks. Cody then passes to Justin, who activates his satchel on his end step, revealing a creature and making a 1/1 sapperling. He then casts Gilded Goose on his turn, making a food token, then activates his Bloodcaster, paying 4 life to cast Gluttonous Troll, making 2 more food tokens. After this, he passes to Ethan. Ethan casts a Twinning Staff, and then overloads a Mystic's Mastery. Oh! He gets to exile all instants and sorcerers in his graveyard, and make copies of them. And because of Twinning Staff, all those copies are doubled. So essentially, Ethan is going to make everyone Windfall twice, and then Molten Psyche twice. And when those Molten Psyches resolve, they only care about how many cards they drew that turn, which is more than enough to kill them. And so once again, Ethan and his Prismari deck are the winners. Hey everyone, welcome back to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching the last video in our Strixhaven Commander videos. Starting next week, we'll be getting back to schedule of alternating between competitive and casual videos. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We also love hearing from you guys down in the comments. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well. Links will be in the description. I'll see you guys next week. Have a smooth day.